Welcome back to Mets Daily. I'm your host, Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Live on all social media. Make sure you smash that thumbs up on this video. Hit that subscribe button below. Hit that share button below. The New York Yankees. Is Cody Bellinger coming up next is the question. And, to me, I think the Mets should be very much in on Cody Bellinger. And here's why. One, position flexibility. This is a guy who has played left field. This is a guy who's played center field. This is a guy who's played right field. And this is a guy that's played 350 games in his career at first base. He plays 4 different positions. He's won a Gold Glove award in his career back in 2019. Now, it's been a while, but this is a guy who's a really good fielder. This is a guy still in his prime at 30 years old. He got to the league at just 21 years old in 2017. What I also like about Cody Bellinger is the winning pedigree. This is a guy who's been in the playoffs every year, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, all with the Dodgers, and then 2025 with the Yankees. He has plenty of postseason experience, and obviously, being with the Dodgers, you're bound to be in the postseason every year. I get it. Everyone's going to say, well, it wasn't him. Well, listen, he was part of winning teams. He was part of a World Series championship. Now, it was the COVID-shortened season, but it still counts. And he also was part of 2 other World Series teams of the Dodgers in 2017, 2018. So, a World Series champion, 3 times in the World Series, and been on 7 teams in his career. 7 years out of 9, the guy has been to the playoffs. That's a winner. And I get where he played, but the fact he's played in October that many times, he's done it at the highest level that many times, is something that the Mets are looking for in all the players that they get. And a big reason they got Jorge Polanco, a big reason that they wanted Marcus Semien in that trade for Brandon Nimmo, despite also wanting to give up that contract that Brandon Nimmo had. They got a winner in Marcus Semien. So the key here is bringing in World Series champions and bringing in guys that have done it at the highest levels. And Cody Bellinger, like Luke Weaver, who has played and had success in New York. Mind you, it just being 1 year. It was a really good year for Cody Bellinger. 272, 334 on base, 29 homers, 98 RBIs, 13 stolen bases. This is a guy that has speed, that can play defense, that can move around the diamond, that can hit a bunch of homers. Remember, early in his career, this is a guy that 39, 25, and then 47 homers, first 3 years of his career. Kind of tailed off after that. 2020 throwout because of 60 games. 2021 up and down, mixed with some injuries. 2022 was not good. 2023 was good. 2024 was solid. 2025 was good. So it's kind of been a Jekyll and Hyde career for Cody Bellinger, but a pretty good one. A guy that over the 162 game averages in his career of 32 and 97. So when you look at his averages and the positions, I'm interested. Now, will the Mets get him? I think it's going. He wants 6 or 7 years according to reports. You got to remember Cody Bellinger's agent, Scott Boras. So he is not going to just take whatever short-term deal he can get. He's going to hold out to try to get a 6 or 7 year deal. I think the lowest he's going to get is 5. And I think where the Mets want to meet with Cody Bellinger is 4 years and a 5th year option. Like we've talked about all offseason, and what we're learning is that the Mets don't really want to commit to someone super long-term with a potential lockout next year, with already long-term commitments to Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, which just how David Stearns operates. He doesn't like giving out massive long-term deals. Soto was kind of the once-in-a-generation deal, and that Steve Cohen stepped in on that one and said, hey, we got to go get this guy. So you're never going to see a 10 or 15, and sometimes you're never going to see a 6 or 7 year deal from David Stearns. I think his sweet spot is that 2 to 3 year mark. But I think they would go to 5 for Cody Bellinger because he is 30 years old. We're not talking about a 35-year-old. This is a guy that still has a lot left in the tank. And while it seems like he's been around forever, most major leaguers, they're not here at age 21. Usually they get here by their mid-20s after spending a few years in the minor leagues. Cody Bellinger, a different case, where he started his big league career with a bang in Los Angeles in 2017. So I'm fascinated to see if the Mets go all out and get Bellinger, or do they go to that mid-tier market. My gut tells me he's going to go back to the Yankees, but we'll see. I think the Mets should be very interested. Speaking of mid-tier market, according to Jeff Passan, the Mets are one of the teams reportedly aggressively pursuing the mid-tier starting pitching market. And, I think if the Mets, and he also mentioned if they could get less years, they'll give a high AAV. So if they get Framber Valdez, they'll give Framber Valdez 3 years for $100 million. The question is, would Framber Valdez accept that? Now, if you're going to get more per year and you have faith in yourself, I don't see the issue of taking more money, less years, but you want the financial long-term stability for you and your family. I understand that. But if they could get Framber on a short term, I think that's their goal. But if not, you start thinking about the middle tier market. And I'll be honest, a lot of these names are not great. Let's take a look at the names that are on that middle tier market. Chris Bassett is a guy, at the end of his Mets tenure, didn't really speak highly of the fan base, speak highly of New York. I don't think he's realistic. Don't love what he said about New York. Don't think he's really built out for New York. So I would probably pass on Chris Bassett. On this name, out of all these names, Lucas Giolito might be the most intriguing. Now, this is a guy, speaking of Jekyll and Hyde, has had a Jekyll and Hyde career, but he's coming off a really good year in Boston. And what also fascinates me, if you remember, Mets' new pitching coach, Justin Willard, is coming from the Red Sox. So who knows, Giolito most recently better than Willard. This is a guy that just was the Red Sox pitching coach. So, I'm fascinated to see. He was, the head of pitching there in Boston. Does he say, I loved what I saw out of Lucas Giolito. I worked with him. He's comfortable with me. That is a name really to monitor on that middle tier market. I think Lucas Giolito is a guy you get for 2 years, $40 million, something like that. He would take a short-term deal. Now, his career's kind of been all over the place. With the White Sox, with the Angels, he struggled. Well, pitching goes out to die in Los Angeles. But you remember, he was an all-star back in 2019. This is a guy that, has had a decent middle-of-the-pack career and is coming off one of the better years of his career, like I said, with Justin Willard. So that's the name on this list that I am intrigued by, that I think there's a connection to. Nick Martinez does not excite me. Zach Littell had a pretty good year in Cincinnati. I'm intrigued by Zach Littell. Again, this is a guy that's another middle-of-the-tier pack guy, number 4 or 5 starter. Littell obviously was on the Rays, and then they traded him to the Reds, ended up with a 3.81 ERA. He's got a career 3.88 ERA, a guy that started off as a reliever, has made a transition to a starter, did have 32 starts last year, 29 the year before. So he's coming off 2 pretty decent seasons, but again, that is a number 3 or 4 starter. And I really think the Mets got to get a frontline guy, which is why Nick Pivetta, who's not in this list, on the trade market intrigues me a lot more than these names. Tyler Mahle, another name worth watching that you're probably going to be able to get for a decent price. Coming off the best year of his career. Tyler Mahle's been around for 9 years. And Mahle with 16 starts and a 2.18 ERA for the Rangers in 2025. So not a huge sample size, but if they believe he could stay healthy and make more starts, he could be intriguing. Made 33 starts in 2021, 23 in 2022, just 5 in 23 and 24, and 3 in 2024 as he battled injuries. So has not pitched a lot of innings since 2021 and 22. So do you have faith Tyler Mahle could stay healthy and be a guy? You're taking more of a risk with him, but he did have a decent season. Walker Buehler, I'll pass. I know he's won before in the past, but coming off a really bad year. Patrick Corbin, no thanks. Michael Lorenzen, again, no thanks. Guy was more of a reliever recently. Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, no thanks. 2 guys that were here that crumbled. The Mets got rid of them. Mets still basically were just paying them. So I'll pass on Scherzer and Verlander. When you look at this list of 10, the names that intrigue me most in this order are Giolito 1, Littell 2, Mahle 3. I'll say Bassett 4 because he is a bulldog on the mound, but I don't think he would come back to New York, but I'll put him at 4. And at 5, I'd probably put Michael Lorenzen. But very underwhelming list. And the Mets end up with one of these guys and no other starting pitchers. I think you're going to see a lot of fans pissed off. I don't think that's an offseason where you look at these guys and say, wow, love this move here by the Mets. So curious to see what they do. One of those guys that's going to be part of the rotation that you got to realize that is factoring into what the Mets do is Noel McLean. And Noel McLean announced that he's going to pitch for Team USA along with another starting pitcher for the Mets, who as of now still started for them, maybe moves to the bullpen if the Mets get a Pivetta, is Clay Holmes. So listen, I don't love Noel McLean pitching for Team USA. And here's the argument, the devil's advocate here, is these guys are going to pitch in spring anyway. I think the reality is that they're going to pitch harder in the WBC. And Noel McLean, who's going through what's going to be his first full major league season, do you really want him wearing that arm out in March when you're hoping that he can maybe pitch in October? Now, I know it sounds crazy right now because people are going to say the Mets don't look like a team that's going to play in October. Well, it's December 18th, and there's more moves to make. But I'm not in love with Noel McLean for pitching in Team USA. I don't care that much about the WBC. I don't think we're in a time in our country that everyone's saying rah rah USA. Love America, love living here, but I don't think this point of time in our world and economy and how expensive everything is, anyone's really like showing off about being from America. We're like the laughing stock of the world. So love it, but also don't care that much about the WBC. It's his right. Good for him. Exciting for him, I'm sure. That USA roster with Skeens and him and Tariq Skubal is absolutely stacked, but don't care that much. Clay Holmes, I don't really understand why he's pitching there. Clay Holmes is okay. He's good, but like, do they really need him on that roster with all those guys I just mentioned? So we'll see how that turns out. Go USA, go, yippee America. But not in love with Noel McLean in the WBC. Juan Soto will play for the Dominican, and Francisco Lindor, his rival, will play for Puerto Rico, as those two countries always duke it out as their rivals. That'll be March 5th to 17th, the WBC, coming up in 2026. All right, let's go to your comments, everybody. From Thursday's show, thank you for leaving them. Keep leaving them below. Keep smashing that thumbs up. And keep subscribing to my YouTube at Jake Brown Live. I got all my YouTube shorts are in there. You want my condensed thoughts are on my YouTube at Jake Brown Live, as well as food reviews, some one-on-ones, and other stuff I do. So check that out on my YouTube. And follow me on TikTok, where I've been doing TikTok Lives, Instagram, and everywhere at Jake Brown Live. And X as well, Twitter. All right, from Homarero Luis, we can't give up Vientos, a kid that hits 27 home, put him lumber like he did in the playoffs. Me, he's a future 35 homer and 100 guy. They should give him this year when he is right, and he's going to be better than Polanco. I disagree with that. Again, one-dimensional player, doesn't do enough. Trade him now. Master of Coin says the Mets have a great package of Major League talent. Beatty, Vientos, Acuna, Sproat, Mauricio, Let's Stearns, Cook. Also, I earned a David Wright captain knockoff jersey. Royal blue button-up. Great deal. $40. Knockoffs are the way to go. Good job, Master Coin. Yeah, listen, a lot of people will knock knockoffs, but they're much cheaper. Love David Wright. Yes, plenty of talent, plenty of young talent. You can't forget that. Mets do have names they're going to move from that young talent, but good point there. Gonzalo Cousins says, thank you, Yankees Hal. Isaac says, let's go Mets. Keelan says, of course, Yankee fans are going to say Luke Weaver's washed up because he left them, but they wanted him. David says, thank you for the information. Peter Heffernan says, thanks for the info. Appreciate it, guys. Blaze Rouse says, if the Phillies DFA Castellanos, Mets should sign him to play DH. He's still a good hitter. I'm not entirely against Castellanos, but Jorge Polanco, I think, is going to be the DH. Honestly, if you get Castellanos, he's probably going to see some time in the outfield. They would probably put him out in left field versus DH. Now, maybe he DHs, and you play. If Polanco's playing first, you DH Castellanos. I'm not entirely against it. I would just be surprised if that happens. But let's see. I don't think the Phillies want to DFA him. I think their preference is to try and trade him versus DFA him. Menotti says, don't exclude D. Cone. Addicted to JB says, we bums will collect. This is a disgrace. You can never have too much pitching. Hermana says, contact hitters always needed. Frozen Harold said, Arise led the league in hits 2 straight seasons. He's had over 200 hits 2 times. Yet, not only has he never had 100 runs in a season, he's never even had 90. Twice he's had more than 71. Before last year's injury season, Simeon had 5 straight 100-plus run seasons and won a Gold Glove. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's what I've said about Arise. Funky numbers. The guy who will lead the league in hits, yet not score a bunch of runs, not steal bases, not get on base a lot. So Luis Arise is the classic. If you look at his average, it's a no-brainer. But if you look at every other number, it's a no-brainer to not sign him. Dr. Manhattan says Weaver is better than Ryan Stanek. And yeah, I think that's how you got to look at Weaver, guys, is he's essentially replacing Ryan Stanek. And if you watched last year, who would you rather have, Weaver or Stanek? I think the answer is pretty obvious, Ryan Stanek. Now, going to last season, you loved picking up Stanek. He was cheap, playoff experience, a bulldog. He just had a remarkably bad season. So this is an upgrade from Stanek, for sure, as your 7th-inning guy. Bob Apotamus says the Phillies got Brad Keller for the same money, but Keller's a much lower ERA and better WAR and winning record. Go figure. Yeah, I get it, but Brad Keller was terrible for the majority of his career, so I understand that. And Devil's Advocate will say, well, Weaver wasn't good until 2024. Well, Weaver was a starter for his whole career. So again, Weaver, Keller, both were starters that in 2024 transition to relievers. Weaver had one great season, one so-so season as a reliever. Keller had one bad season and one good season as a reliever. So they're pretty much the same exact thing. Paul Hart says, why not go all the way with these ex-Yankees and sign Bellinger? And that's why we talked about Bellinger today. I agree. All right, guys, thanks for leaving the comments. We'll keep reading them. Tomorrow's show, special guest, Wardy, Tyler Ward, our good friend of the program, will be joining us, so stay tuned for that. Smash that thumbs up. Subscribe. We're closing in on 3,000. I think we might hit it before Christmas. We might hit it on Christmas Eve, maybe even this weekend. So keep subscribing, keep sharing, and keep cheering on the boys. I know the morale is down for Met fans right now, but let Stearns cook, like we like to say. Let him cook. I believe there are a lot of pieces out there. To me, that trade with the Padres makes the most sense. You get a Pivetta, you get Morahone, you address starter, you address reliever, and then, get Bellinger. Maybe get Tucker if the years come down. But I think the reality is, outside of Bellinger and maybe 5 years, anyone else, I don't think the Mets want to go beyond 3. So, listen, I don't love it. It's hard to love that approach. But they're being a little bit more frugal. I don't think that means you're going to field a bad team. I think it's just going to be a different looking team that might not be the juiciest names, might not be polar bears and guys with nicknames. But if it's a better collective unit and more clutch hitters that do things right, the Blue Jays did that and it worked for them. I think the Mets are trying to find that Toronto Blue Jays National League model and make that work for them. And if it does, hey, maybe the Mets end up getting to the World Series. We're a long ways away from that, but we'll be covering it all. Happy Hanukkah, happy holidays, and we'll talk to you tomorrow with Wardy right here on Mets Daily.